I never thought I'd see justice served on a silver platter, but that's exactly what happened when the FBI agent knocked on my Uncle Robert's door 15 years after he stole my inheritance. The look on his face, captured perfectly on his doorbell camera and later shared with me, was worth every second of the long game I'd played. When my father died unexpectedly during my senior year of college, I had no idea the modest family home in Vermont and his small but respectable savings would become the center of a betrayal that would define my 20s. My Uncle Robert, Dad's only brother and a respected attorney in our small New England town, offered to handle the estate. "Focus on graduating," he told me, his arm around my shoulders at the funeral. "I'll make sure everything's taken care of." 3 months later, I discovered there was nothing left to take care of. The house had been sold, the accounts emptied, and according to the paperwork I later discovered was forged, I had willingly signed everything over to him. When confronted, Uncle Robert simply smiled and said, "Your word against mine, sweetheart, and who do you think people will believe? The grieving, unstable college girl, or the attorney who's served on the town council for 20 years? So I left, disappeared completely, but I didn't run away. I was merely taking a step back to plan my return. Little did my uncle know that his perfect crime would eventually lead to federal agents at his door, a scandal that would rock our hometown to its core, and a reckoning that was 15 years in the making. Growing up in Maplewood, Vermont, our family was what locals called comfortable, not wealthy by New England standards, but respected. My father, Thomas Calloway, taught American history at the regional high school for 30 years. A widower since I was 8, Dad raised me alone after my mother's car accident on a treacherous mountain road during a winter storm. We lived in my grandparents' colonial home, passed down through generations since the 1880s, a modest 2-story white house with black shutters and a wraparound porch where Dad and I would shell peas in summer and carve pumpkins in fall. Then there was Uncle Robert, Dad's younger brother by 5 years and his complete opposite. Where Dad was quiet and thoughtful, Robert was charismatic and ambitious. While Dad dedicated his life to teaching teenagers about the Civil War, Robert went to law school and returned to establish the only law practice in town. He married Aunt Patricia, who came from Boston money, as the locals whispered, and they built a modern house on Hillcrest Drive overlooking the valley, the kind of home featured in regional magazines. Family gatherings always followed the same pattern: Thanksgiving at our house with Dad's homemade cranberry sauce and me helping in the kitchen, Christmas Eve at Robert and Patricia's with their perfectly coordinated decorations and catered food. My cousins, Emma and Jason, attended private schools and spent summers at camps I could only dream about. Uncle Robert had a way of reminding us of the disparity between our branches of the family tree. "Tommy," he'd say to my father over Thanksgiving turkey, "I could get you a meeting with the superintendent of Greenfield Academy. They need a history teacher, and the salary would be twice what you're making now." Dad would just smile. "I'm happy where I am, Rob." Then Robert would turn to me. "And what about you, Allison? Still thinking state college?" The way he'd say it, like it was a consolation prize. When I was 16, I overheard him at a family 4th of July barbecue. "Tommy's too proud to accept help, but that girl deserves better than what he can provide. No mother, no real opportunities. It's a shame." The summer before my senior year of high school, Dad was diagnosed with heart problems. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but it required medication and monitoring. Uncle Robert suddenly became more present in our lives, stopping by weekly, bringing groceries, offering rides to Dad's appointments. "I'm just looking out for my big brother," he'd say. But there was something calculating in his eyes when he surveyed our home, as if he was taking inventory. Dad confided in me one night, sitting on the porch swing. "I've made sure you'll be taken care of, Allie. The house, my savings, it's not much, but it's yours when the time comes. I've put it all in writing." He handed me a sealed envelope. "Keep this somewhere safe, just in case." I tucked it into my copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, my favorite book and the last gift my mother had given me. That envelope disappeared 3 days after Dad's funeral. So did the original of his will. Uncle Robert produced a new one, perfectly legal, witnessed, and notarized, leaving everything to him as trustee until I turned 30. Your father was worried about you making impulsive decisions, he explained as I sat stunned in his office. He wanted me to protect your inheritance. When I mentioned the envelope Dad had given me, Robert's smile never faltered. Grief plays tricks on the mind, Allison. There was no envelope. 1 week later, I found my copy of To Kill a Mockingbird in the donation box headed to the library book sale. The envelope was gone. And somehow, I knew exactly where it had gone. I finished my final semester at the University of Vermont in a fog of grief and betrayal. Uncle Robert had moved quickly. The house was already on the market, listed by Patricia's real estate company. "We'll get top dollar," he assured me over the phone. "The market's hot right now." When I asked about staying there until I found a job and apartment, he sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "The new owners want to renovate before winter. We found you a nice little apartment in Burlington. I've already paid the security deposit from your trust." The trust was Robert's favorite fiction. There was no trust, at least not one I could access or verify. Every time I asked for documentation, there was always some reason why the papers weren't available. I graduated with my degree in computer science and data analytics, a field I'd chosen partly because Dad had always encouraged my aptitude for mathematics, and partly because I knew it would give me independence. The day after graduation, I visited Robert's office, unannounced. His secretary, Nancy, who'd known me since I was in diapers, looked uncomfortable as she announced me. "Mr. Calloway, your niece is here to see you." Robert emerged from his office, all smiles for the benefit of the small-town audience. "Allison, what a surprise. Come in, come in." His office was all leather and mahogany, with diplomas and certificates strategically positioned for clients to see. He closed the door and his smile dimmed slightly. "I want to see the trust documentation," I said without preamble. "All of it, and the accounting of my father's estate." Robert leaned back in his chair. "We've been through this, Allison. Everything is being managed properly. Why don't you focus on finding a job? I heard the tech company in Burlington is hiring." "Because it's my inheritance, and I have a right to know." His expression hardened just slightly. "Actually, legally, you don't. Not until you're 30. That was your father's wish." "That's not what he told me." "And yet, here we are," he said, spreading his hands. "Look, I understand this is difficult. Change always is. But the house sale closes next week, and you need to have your things out by Friday. Patricia has arranged for a storage unit for anything you can't take to the apartment." I stood my ground. "I'm not leaving until I see documentation." Robert checked his watch. "I have a client arriving in 5 minutes. We can discuss this at Sunday dinner. Patricia's making her pot roast." Sunday dinner, the weekly ritual that had become a stage for my humiliation. Emma home from her semester in Paris, Jason talking about his internship at a prestigious Boston law firm, and me, the poor relation, being asked pointed questions about my modest career prospects. I went anyway, one last time. The Calloway Sunday dinner was an institution in our family. Patricia's dining room was set with her grandmother's china, crystal glasses that rang like bells when touched, and silverware that had to be hand-polished. The conversation always began with local gossip, moved to national politics, with Robert holding court, and inevitably turned to family matters. This particular Sunday, Emma was showing photos from Paris on her tablet. "Daddy, remember that little gallery in Montmartre? The owner asked if I'd consider showing some of my photographs next summer." Patricia beamed. "That's wonderful, darling. We could all go for the opening." "Speaking of travel," Robert segued smoothly, "Allison, have you decided about that apartment in Burlington? Nancy's son is looking for a roommate if you're concerned about the rent." "Actually," I said, cutting into my pot roast, "I've been offered a position with a tech firm in Seattle. I start in 3 weeks." The table went silent. This wasn't in Robert's script. Seattle? Patricia's fork paused midway to her mouth. But that's so far away. That's rather sudden, Robert said, his voice carefully modulated. Are you sure that's wise? Moving across the country without a support system? I need a fresh start, I replied. And they're offering a competitive salary with relocation assistance. Robert's jaw tightened. We should discuss this privately. There are considerations with the trust. What trust? I interrupted, putting down my fork. The trust you've never shown me documentation for? The trust that somehow covers my apartment deposit but can't provide me a single statement? Emma and Jason exchanged glances. Patricia cleared her throat. Perhaps this isn't dinner conversation. When is it conversation then? I pressed. Because every time I ask, there's some reason why we can't discuss it. Robert dabbed his mouth with his napkin. Allison, you're being emotional. This isn't appropriate. What's not appropriate is stealing my inheritance, I said, my voice deadly calm. The dining room went completely silent. Even the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to hold its tick. I think you should leave, Robert said quietly. I stood, placing my napkin beside my half-eaten dinner. I've already packed. My flight leaves tomorrow morning. As I turned to go, Robert called after me. You walk out that door. Don't expect anything from this family again. I paused at the threshold of the dining room, looking back at the tableau. Robert's reddening face, Patricia's shocked expression, my cousin's wide eyes. I stopped expecting anything the day you stole my father's will from my book, I said. But don't worry, Uncle Robert, this isn't goodbye. It's just intermission. 15 years is a long time to nurse a grudge, or to build a case. Seattle became my sanctuary and my launching pad. I threw myself into work, building expertise in data security and digital forensics. Within 5 years, I had founded my own consulting firm, specializing in financial fraud detection. The irony wasn't lost on me. I kept tabs on the Callaways from afar. Social media made it easy. Emma's photography career, Jason following his father into law, Patricia's charity galas. Robert's ascent to state politics surprised no one. He was now a state senator with whispers of higher ambitions. What they didn't know? I had never stopped looking for evidence. Dad's old friends, former colleagues, bank tellers who remembered him, I cultivated these connections discreetly during occasional business trips back east. Slowly, methodically, I pieced together the puzzle. The breakthrough came from Nancy, Robert's former secretary, now retired. She contacted me through a secure email I'd given her years ago. There were duplicate files, her message read, kept in the basement archive. Robert never knew I had keys. I think you should see them. 2 weeks later, I held the smoking gun. The original will, Dad's handwritten letter explaining his wishes, and, most damning, Robert's own notes detailing how he'd forged documents and manipulated the probate process. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Robert was hosting a campaign fundraiser at the Maplewood Country Club, announcing his candidacy for governor. The entire town would be there, the perfect audience. I flew in under an assumed name, booked a room at the Highway Motel, and prepared for my return. Nancy had secured me an invitation through her husband, a longtime country club member. The ballroom gleamed with chandeliers and local wealth. Campaign posters featured Robert's face, alongside slogans about family values and integrity in leadership. The irony was almost too much. I wore a simple black dress, my hair styled differently than the girl who'd left town 15 years ago. I stood at the bar, watching Robert work the room, Patricia at his side in designer silk, both of them radiating the confidence of people who believe they're untouchable. Robert was midway through his speech when I made my move. And with your support, we can bring those same values of trust, integrity, and family loyalty to the governor's office. Applause rippled through the room. Speaking of family loyalty, I said loudly from the back, my voice carrying in the sudden lull, should we discuss how those values applied to your brother's estate, Senator Callaway? The room went quiet. Robert squinted toward the back, not recognizing me at first. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've been introduced," he said smoothly, the consummate politician. I walked forward, parting the crowd. "We have, actually, many times, but perhaps you've forgotten your niece, Allison Calloway." The whispers started immediately. Patricia's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. "Allison," Robert recovered quickly, his public smile in place. "What a surprise. Ladies and gentlemen, my niece has returned from, where was it again?" "Seattle," I supplied. "Where I've spent 15 years building a career in financial fraud investigation. Interesting field. You learn so much about how people hide their crimes." Robert's smile tightened. "Perhaps we could catch up privately after the event. I think this is a conversation everyone should hear," I countered, pulling a folder from my clutch, "especially since it concerns the character of a gubernatorial candidate." The room was dead silent now. Even the servers had stopped moving. 15 years ago, this man stole my inheritance through fraud, forgery, and abuse of his position as an attorney, I announced, my voice steady. "I have the evidence right here, including the original will he claimed never existed, his own notes detailing the fraud, and sworn statements from witnesses." Robert stepped from behind the podium. "Allison, you're making serious accusations based on misunderstandings." "There's no misunderstanding these," I said, holding up copies of his own handwritten notes, "or the fact that the house my father left to me was sold and the proceeds went into an offshore account, or that the trust you claimed to manage for me never existed." The murmuring in the room grew louder. I saw the mayor shift uncomfortably. The local newspaper editor was already typing on his phone. "These are the desperate claims of a troubled young woman," Robert tried, his voice losing his confidence. "My brother was concerned about her stability, which is why—" "Save it for your attorney, Robert," I cut in. "The FBI has already received copies of everything I have here. They're particularly interested in how these offshore accounts connect to your campaign financing." As if on cue, the ballroom doors opened. 2 men in suits entered, their posture unmistakably federal law enforcement. "Senator Calloway," one called out, "we need to speak with you immediately." The room erupted in chaos. Cameras flashed. Patricia dropped her glass, shattering crystal across the polished floor. Emma and Jason stood frozen near the stage, watching their family legacy implode in real time. I walked directly to Robert, stopping just a foot away, close enough to see the sweat beating on his upper lip, the pulse pounding in his neck. "This isn't just about the money," I said quietly, for his ears only. "This is for my father. You betrayed your own brother and thought you'd get away with it?" Robert's face contorted with rage. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed. "I will destroy you for this." I smiled. The same cold smile he'd given me 15 years ago in his office. "You already tried that, Uncle Robert. My turn now." As the FBI agents led him toward a private room for questioning, I walked out the front doors of the country club into the cool Vermont evening, leaving behind the wreckage of the Calloway family reputation and 15 years of carefully cultivated lies. The fallout was swift and merciless. The Vermont State Journal ran the headline, "State Senator Faces Federal Fraud Investigation," above the fold. Local TV stations camped outside Robert's Hillcrest Drive home, capturing footage of FBI agents carrying boxes of documents to unmarked vehicles. Within 48 hours, Robert had withdrawn from the gubernatorial race to focus on family matters, political speak for damage control. I stayed at the Highway Motel, extending my reservation day by day as events unfolded. On the 3rd morning, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Emma standing there, looking nothing like the polished socialite from the fundraiser. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a sweater. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I didn't know," she said finally, "about what Dad did to you. I need you to believe that." "Would it have mattered if you did?" I asked, not unkindly. Emma looked up, her eyes filling with tears. I don't know. I was 19, wrapped up in my own world. Dad was Dad. Whatever he said was gospel in our house. She pulled something from her bag, a worn, leather-bound book. My breath caught as she handed it to me. To Kill a Mockingbird, I whispered, running my fingers over the familiar cover. I found it in Dad's home office yesterday, in a locked drawer with some other things I think you should see. Inside the book, tucked between the final pages, was a yellowed envelope. Not my father's original note, but something else. Emma had brought copies of bank statements, property deeds, and transfer records, a paper trail of my inheritances journey from legitimate estate to Robert's personal accounts. Jason's helping me go through everything, Emma explained. He works for the DA's office in Boston now. He says Dad's going to prison, Allison. The FBI found connections to other financial crimes, campaign finance violations. I should have felt vindication, but instead, I felt a strange emptiness. What about Patricia? Mom claims she knew nothing, but Emma trailed off, her implication clear. She's staying with her sister in Connecticut. The house is already on the market. 2 days later, I received a call from Special Agent Marcus Torres, the lead FBI investigator on Robert's case. He wanted to meet in person. We sat at a corner table in a Burlington coffee shop, away from curious ears. Your evidence was the thread that unraveled everything, he explained, sliding a manila folder across the table. Senator Calloway wasn't just stealing from you. We found evidence of embezzlement from his law clients, tax evasion, and campaign finance fraud going back over a decade. I opened the folder to find documentation of accounts in the Cayman Islands, property holdings under shell companies, and a list of victims, mostly elderly clients of Robert's law practice who had no idea their estates had been pillaged. How many people? I asked. 17 confirmed cases so far, Torres replied grimly. Mostly trusts and estates he managed. Your father's was actually one of the smaller amounts, though it appears to have been where he refined his methods. The criminal proceedings moved with surprising speed, accelerated by Robert's decision to cooperate in exchange for sentencing considerations. He pled guilty to multiple federal charges, including wire fraud, tax evasion, and misappropriation of client funds. At the sentencing hearing, I was invited to make a victim impact statement. The courtroom was packed. Former clients, townsfolk, media. Robert sat at the defense table, diminished in his navy suit, the confident politician replaced by a man facing the consequences of his actions. When my turn came, I approached the podium, feeling the weight of 15 years of anger and loss. Your Honor, my father was a teacher who believed in justice and truth. The greatest theft my uncle committed wasn't of money or property. It was stealing the security and peace that should have followed my father's careful planning for his only child. For 15 years, I've carried the burden of this betrayal, allowing it to shape my career choices, my relationships, and my ability to trust. I looked directly at Robert, who couldn't meet my eyes. I don't seek vengeance today. I seek restoration, not just for myself, but for all the families whose trust was violated by a man who used his position and family connections to prey on the vulnerable. My father believed that character was revealed in how we treat those who cannot defend themselves. Robert Calloway failed that test of character, and justice demands accountability. The judge sentenced Robert to 12 years in federal prison and ordered full restitution to all victims. The family home on Hillcrest Drive, the law practice, the investment properties, all were liquidated to satisfy the judgment. 2 months after the sentencing, I stood on the porch of my childhood home, the Colonial with black shutters and wraparound porch. The new owners, learning of the situation through the media coverage, had contacted me with an unexpected proposition. They wanted to sell the house back to me at their purchase price. This house has been in your family for generations, Mrs. Reynolds had explained on the phone. It never should have left it. As I turned the key in the lock, a sense of homecoming washed over me. The hardwood floors still creaked in the same places, the height markings tracking my growth still faintly marked the kitchen door frame. But it wasn't the same. I wasn't the same. I hired local contractors to renovate, keeping the character but updating systems and spaces. During the work, the crew discovered something behind a loose baseboard in what had been my father's bedroom. A small metal box containing my mother's wedding ring, family photos, and a handwritten letter from my father dated just weeks before his death. "My dearest Allison," it began, "if you're reading this, something has happened to me. Know that you were the greatest joy of my life, and that everything I have is yours. Trust your instincts and your intelligence. They will guide you when I cannot." That evening, as the Vermont sunset painted the mountains in gold and crimson, my phone rang. It was Jason. "I found something you should know," he said without preamble. "Dad's original plan wasn't to steal your inheritance. He was going to borrow against it to cover investment losses. But then he discovered something about your father, about Thomas." My heart stuttered. "What about him?" "Evidence that your father knew about financial improprieties at Dad's law firm years ago and had documented them. Dad found the documentation after Thomas died. That's why he had to make sure you never saw the original will or any papers. He was covering his tracks, afraid you'd find what your father had discovered." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My quiet, principled father had been protecting evidence of his brother's crimes all along, perhaps hoping Robert would reform, perhaps waiting for the right moment to confront him. "There's something else," Jason continued. "Emma and I want no part of anything that came from Dad's crimes. Whatever restitution is allocated to you, we want you to have it. It's the only way we can begin to make this right." As I hung up, I realized that the justice I'd sought for 15 years wasn't just about recovering what was stolen, it was about restoring truth. My father had stood for integrity, even when it meant standing against his own brother. In the end, that legacy was worth more than any inheritance. Sitting on the porch swing of my childhood home, watching the same Vermont maples turn the same autumn gold they always have, I realized that inheritance comes in many forms. The house is mine again, not as a victory trophy, but as a reclamation of my father's legacy. The money has been restored, with interest, but that was never really what this fight was about. What I truly inherited from my father wasn't property or savings, but his moral compass, his belief that truth matters, that patience and persistence can overcome deception, and that justice, however delayed,